Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat siang, Bapak Ibu sekalian. My name is Christophe Bahuet. I'm currently the Deputy Regional Director for Asia Pacific of UNDP and Director of the Bangkok Regional Hub. Let me first thank all of you for accepting our invitation, for coming this afternoon to this presentation of the Regional Human Development Report for Asia and the Pacific, prepared by the United Nations Development Programme. Let me particularly acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Health, Pak Menteri Kesehatan, Bapak Budi Sadikin. Thank you very much for joining us. Also of our panelists, Ibu Vivi Alatas, economist, Mbak Putri Komarudin, anggota DPR, Member of Parliament, and Ibu Shinta Kamdani, who will join us. Let me also recognize the role of the UNDP resident representative in Indonesia, Mr. Norimasa Shimomura, will facilitate the panel discussion in a moment. And allow me also to thank the UNDP team who has put together this very special show, working late on a Sunday night to make sure everything, the light and the sounds are going fine. Now, maybe because it's such a special setting, I should not present this as a report, and maybe you can see the slide. I hope it works. So let me not present this as a report, but maybe more as a story. And part of this story has already been written, and the other part of the story has still to be written in the future. And this is a story of human development in Asia, in the Pacific. Now, of course, because it's a regional report, it's quite large. But as I was reading it, I felt there were so many points that were very relevant to Indonesia that I'm very happy we're having this event this afternoon here in Jakarta. Now, when you think of the development journey, the development story, and we can move to the next slide. Next one. There is no question that the development story is a success story for Asia and the Pacific. There have been tremendous progress in human development. It's actually the strongest progress in all the regions of the world, made over decades. But it has also, and we need to be nuanced this success story, it has also been marked by severe exclusion, regional disparities, gender inequalities, and also, and to recently, widespread disruption. So let me try to not tell you the whole story, but give you some part of the story, and the whole story is in the report. So if we look at this progress I was mentioning, it's actually in all the dimensions of human development. It's income, but it's also health indicator, education indicator. And it has been a very dramatic decrease of poverty. If you look at the fall of extreme poverty rate in East Asia and the Pacific, and to some extent in South Asia, it's actually quite marked. And it's not only China, it's also Indonesia, moving, from significant percentage to actually single digit in terms of poverty. But it's also to be, nuanced by region, East Asia being on the top, and you see Southeast Asia coming second, followed by South Asia, and then the Pacific with more challenges. But you see at the very end of this green light, you see an inflection. And that's really what we should talk about. What does it mean? That's a disruption I was mentioning. I mean, we've known disruption in Indonesia in 1998, we've known shocks, but it's largely the pandemic, the impact of the pandemic, and then some external shocks that have actually accounted for this very strange picture that you see here, with Human Development Index, and let's look at Southeast Asia at the very top of the first graph. The Human Development Index of Southeast Asia has gone backwards. Now, in practical terms, it means that decades of progress in human development have been reversed in a few years. We have actually several setbacks, including in gender inequalities. The Gender Inequality Index has gone worse in the last 3-4 years, and you see it for Southeast Asia. I should say Indonesia has actually fared better than many countries in Southeast Asia, which doesn't mean, far from it, that there are no gender inequality challenges in Indonesia. So we've seen those disruptions. And now we need to see what's coming in terms of the future. What we see as UNDP is a combination of factors. One is unmet aspirations by very significant segments of the population. We also see heightened human insecurity, and that is compounded by a potentially more turbulent future, and probably potentially is an understatement, a likely more turbulent future. So what does that mean in terms of people's life? And I'm just going to give an example, a few examples. If you look at the feeling of precarity of multiple threats, one of them is jobs. And there was this very interesting survey, do people worry about job loss? And you see 15 countries in the region. Indonesia is actually number 5. Actually, quite a large segment, a large portion of people in Indonesia worry very much, or to a great deal, about losing jobs. So you have this feeling of precarity, of human insecurity that is very pregnant. We also have a breach of planetary boundaries that create existential threats, and you have a whole segment, chapter of the report talking about it. The most telling example I can use is natural disaster. Because at the global scale, we see natural disaster being more frequent and actually much more damaging. But Asia Pacific is far above the world median, and we're here in Indonesia, and we don't need to recall the number of disasters that have struck Indonesia. But it's not only the numbers, it's also the number of lives claimed and the economic loss or loss of economic opportunity that matters. So we have this threat to be faced, and then we have social cohesion that is increasingly at risk. And I think the report dwells really on an analysis of social cohesion that has different facets depending on the country, depending on the economic political system, but it's actually very, very, very much to be felt. It can be erosion of democracy, erosion of institutions, erosion of trust, citizens' trust in institutions like corruption, anti-corruption commissions. It's also the limitation of public and civic space. It's also polarization fueled by social media. And all this comes at a time where actually the income share of the bottom 50s is going down quite significantly in Asia. So that is actually a very volatile context that actually is a threat for the future. Now, what do we do in terms of the directions? And a large part of the story is what kind of directions can we take? What are the main parameters to be taken into consideration? And the three that we are really emphasizing is mainstreaming human development, recalibrating growth strategy, and making change happen for real. Now, just to elaborate a little bit on those points, the tenets of human development, since we've known them, remain extremely valid. Enlarging people's choice, building stronger base for human security, and then meeting obligation for future generations remain very valid. But the observation we are making that while they have been very well articulated, very well accepted, human development still remain insufficiently mainstream in policies, in the strategy, national strategy. So we need to reinforce that. We need also to enlarge people's choice and tackle a number of structural deficiencies that represent risk and actually increase the vulnerabilities I was mentioning. We have to acknowledge in the region 1.3 billion of people are actually working in the informal sector. And the graph there gives us a size of the informal employment. And I think one of the paradoxes of Asia Pacific, including Southeast Asia, is that while there have been a very dynamic, entrepreneurship, a lot of growth, the share of informal workers remains very, very high. And that has a number of implications in terms of legal protection, in terms of human rights, but also in terms of vulnerability when a pandemic strikes, as we saw a few years back. So we need really to look at this issue of structural exclusion, which is for us, for the United Nations, also an issue of human dignity, and we need to enhance human capabilities to actually make employment more formal. Moving to the next slide. Social protection has been a very important way of cushioning the impact when the pandemic started. Indonesia has adopted quite a number of packages during the time. If you look at social protection, you have a huge gap between East Asia and other parts of the region. And even Southeast Asia, which is the second, the proportion of coverage is just 1/3. And the proportion of expenditures in terms of percentage of GDP is at a low 2.3. So there is really a need, learning from the very recent lessons of vulnerability from the pandemic, to expand, transform social protection and expand the coverage. But human security also means health security. And I'm very happy that, Parliamentary, you're here. Health security is actually a fundamental dimension of the future. Access to health, quality of health, and food security. And we need to adapt the profile of vulnerabilities, because in a dynamic environment, vulnerability changes. They can be economic vulnerability, they can be climate vulnerabilities. So we need to be able to have this agility to adapt and respond to the various vulnerability that we observe. But tackling the issue of social protection and creating the fiscal space for it is absolutely fundamental. Meet obligation for future generation. There is one very telling graph, and that's the annual CO2 emission by region. And you see the share of Asia Pacific, and you see the trajectory of Asia Pacific. Now, you can debate about what happened in the past, but the fact is Asia Pacific is accounting for a growing share of CO2 emission. Accelerating just energy transition is absolutely an imperative, and very happy that Indonesia has taken this path with the Just Energy Transition Partnership with UNDP and many other partners. We need to invest in climate resilience. We need to protect natural resources, and we need to manage public finance and debt. And there is a whole part of the report that dwells on the debt issue. In countries like Bhutan and Maldives, the service of debt is now more than the GDPs, and even in countries, including Indonesia, the percentage of spending on debt interest, servicing the debt, is actually too high compared to health expenditure. So the debt has really become a major challenge here in Asia Pacific. Regulating growth strategy. There is no discussion that growth is absolutely needed. There will not be human development if we don't have growth. The question remains, as we try to recover from the pandemic, that what is the right kind of growth? We know that growth can be jobless, growth can be voiceless, growth can be exclusive. So we need actually to look at the different kind of growth, look at the choices that are needed, and really emphasize inclusion. Inclusion for social and economic purposes is absolutely essential. If you look at women, taking large share of women out of the labor market is actually penalizing the growth and penalizing the human development. Export-led growth still remains valid, and we know this has been the story of the Asian tigers. We're not saying that export-led growth is no longer valid. Yes, it is, but we're nuancing that observation in a context of both increased competitiveness and also slow globalization and sometimes barriers to trade. So you need to look at changing the tack of export-led growth and maximizing the potential of domestic markets, which the Asian tiger didn't do at that time, but is actually a real potential, partly for large economies, and Indonesia is definitely one of them. Maximizing the potential of domestic markets in terms of production and also consumption can actually do a great deal, bring a lot of benefits to both growth and human development, and that includes manufacturing sector and risk-informed development. We've seen in regions excellent example of incorporating risk-informed development in every decision. I think the Pacific countries, maybe because they are more vulnerable, have actually integrated all risk-informed development in their policy, but there is need to actually intensify this with respect to climate, but also pandemic, health risk, and others. So we do not re-emphasize manufacturing, and partly for the economy, there is a whole part on this sectoral analysis. Manufacturing sector still matters also because it's a long value chain. So it has a lot of benefits, but it needs combined with other dimensions. So the development path cannot rest only on manufacturing. It has actually to be combined with new drivers in agriculture, services, green, blue or care economy, and Indonesia is doing a lot already in blue economy, and leverage technology. Whereas, still research and development in manufacturing sector is important, but you see a lot of, digitalization in other sector, and you see this different pace between good export, service export, and digital delivery service export. So there is a whole reflection, and maybe for some countries, the opportunity to position themselves in terms of digital service for export. Now, it's not only about rethinking human development. It's not only about recalibrating growth. There are two prerequisites for this. One is the political will at the higher level of the state for a new vision for the future, for a different path to human development. So articulating this and making it part of services to be able to deliver and reach out to all the population, including the isolated one. So this is, one of the conclusions. I think my final word about this story is that two things. One is it elaborates on these ideas, and then I think it could be very interesting in the context of different countries, Indonesia here, to see how these ideas fit in the national context, what they can actually offer as options, policy option paths for renewing, re-energizing human development in Indonesia. And also the story is full of examples from different countries. Many references, very positive reference to Indonesia, what has been done, but also references to the Philippines, Singapore, India, China, and others, which can actually also prompt some reflection in Indonesia about things that have been done and could be also adjusted. So this is really the story of this regional human development report. I hope you'll want to read the whole story. But before that, I think some of the ideas, some of the message could be placed in the Indonesian context, and that will be the next segment of this event. Thank you for your attention. Terima kasih. And if I may invite Bapak Menteri. Terima kasih.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. When I came here, I imagined that we will watch a fashion show. But you are very unfortunate that you will see the Ministry of Health slightly obese, and will be 60 next year. But you have to stuck with me. That's why I understand I will make it short. I will make it short. So you can see whatever you imagine later on longer. Indonesia, the president has set up a target. In 2045, we would like to be the golden period of Indonesia. Indonesia Emas. We set up a target of GDP per capita, 30,000 per capita. We are now at 40,700. When I talked with the president asked me, Budi, I really want to bring Indonesia to a high-income country groups. And share with him, as a banker for 30 years, high-income country is very specific. The numbers of GDP per capita is above 13,000. We are now at 4,700. So we have to increase 3 times to make Indonesia lead and enter the high-income country groups. And I said to him, based on my knowledge, history shows that every nation have a short windows of opportunity where they have the biggest momentum and inertia to move to high-income country. This window, this period happens during the demographic bonus time. Why? It's very logic. Because during demographic bonus, the number of productive people in a nation reach the maximum. In Indonesia, the demographic bonus will happen in 2030. What I heard is about 68% of 200 million Indonesian will be in the productive period. So they can get income and create the largest opportunity or period or windows to leapfrog, to jump, to enter a high income country group. If we fail to bring our country in 2030 to become high income country, then the populations will be aging, the opportunity will be less, and that will be more difficult to the country to move to the high income country, and most of the country will be trapped forever in middle income trap. And 2030, ladies and gentlemen, is only 7 years down the road. If we are Indonesian policy makers fail to use this momentum 7 years from now, then there is a bigger and bigger chance that our children, the children of our children, will be trapped in middle income country. And they will never be able to feel how to live in a high income country. And that will be my sin, our sin, if we leave that legacy to the next generations. So that is something that always keeps sharing with other people, that we have a very short period of time and we have to use this period carefully. And now how can we make this period better? They told me to walk around, although I'm not as beautiful as others. But how do you make sure that during the 7 years, what should we do? And why he invited Ministry of Health? The reason is because health is very, very important. Can you imagine if you would like to have someone with the average income of 13,000 US dollar per annum, not 40,700? This guy should be healthy and smart. I specifically mention healthy and smart, not to compete with my friends Nadim Makarim, but I would like to share to Nadim, however smart you are, if you are sick and lay on bed, you will never be productive. And if you have to choose whether you have to be the smartest people on earth, but you have to live in wheelchair, or you are maybe not the smartest, but second smartest or third smartest, but you can live normally, you can prefer to live healthy. So that's why health takes priority than smart. So it is very critical. If Indonesia would aspire to be a high-income country in 2020, use that windows of opportunity, then we have to make sure that Indonesian population are healthy and smart. That's why you can choose whatever minister wrongly, but don't never choose a wrong health ministers and the education minister in the next 7 years. Otherwise, I will make the sin to all of the generations after us. Now, then it became my job. How can we make our population healthy? I study the Sustainable Development Goal. It says, to promote healthy life and well-being for all people, equity principle, and all ages, epidemiological principle. And when I have a G20 meeting, G7 meeting, APEC meeting, I look at the title of my colleague. Ministry of Health, Secretary of Health and Human Services. I never found any ministers in any country with the title Ministry of Sickness, Ministry of Hospital, Minister of Medicine. I never seen it. So it's very clear that the job of the health ministers is to keep our population healthy, not to cure sick people. There is no cure sick people word in Sustainable Development Goal target. There's no such cure sick medicine hospital word in any title of every health ministers in 192 countries. So it's very clear that to create a healthy population, we have to keep them healthy. You have to focus on the upstream. don't focus on the downstream. We have to focus on to make them healthy, not to cure them when they are sick. We have to focus on the public healthcare, public health, rather than hospital. We have to focus on the cadres and the puskesmas, rather than the doctors, the specialists. We have to focus on screening and promotion, not to focus on expensive medicine, drugs, or medical equipment. That has to be very, very clear. That is the reason that when we did the reform, then the main pillar of the reform is reform on the primary care. How to keep our population healthy. We will revitalize our primary care clinics. Not only at 10,000 puskesmas. We have 38 provinces or states, 514 cities, 10,000 districts. And the healthcare facilities formally stop at 10,000 districts. It's impossible to serve 280 million people at 7,000 islands. So we decided to move down to 85,000 villages and 300,000 hamlet or posyandu. What does it mean by revitalize? We will standardize the service. We will equip them with the right people, the right instrument, the right devices. Hopefully on the 7th of December, the World Bank Board will approve a 4 billion loan for health sector alone in Indonesia for the next 5 years. So we can revamp these public health labs. We will increase the number of immunization. PCP, HPV, the cervical cancer that we haven't implemented before. We will increase the mandatory screening for diabetes, sugar level, hypertension, cholesterol level, screening for cancer, breast cancer and cervix cancer, the number 1 and number 2 killers in women, or lung cancer and colorectal, the number 1 and number 2 killers in Indonesian men. Because if we can do screening early, then it will be easier to cure. If we make our people healthy, then they don't have to go to the hospital, and they will be productive. They can earn money, then we can increase our income per capita, and we will successfully upgrade it into high-income country. So that's why switch the focus, the time, the energy, the money to hospitals, to cure sick people, into puskesmas, to prevent the people healthy are the key initiative. In the new law that we have passed through the parliament, it has a very clear shift into that particular directions. I understand that doctors is being trained many 20, 30 years to cure sick people. That's why we need to bring in other healthcare professionals, the public health expert, to make sure there is a balance between curing sick people and to maintain people happy. The second topic that I would like to share with you, because many of you are ambassadors, many of you working in the economy, is that health is expensive. Health can be quite expensive. So make sure when we would like to maintain healthy people, we have to make sure that we have enough money to cover it. And I can share with you one example, because I don't have the chart, but I can share with you. Indonesia spend on the average 140 US per capita per annum, and the outcome, our average life is 72 years old. If I can compare with United States, for example, the average life is 80 years, and they spend 11,000 US dollars per annum. I always have a joke with my colleague, Secretary Becher, United States, because I can compare with other countries that have a very similar outcome, 80 years old. The country is Cuba. If you Google Cuba, the average life is very similar to the US. The only difference, the average per capita spending is 1,900 instead of 11,000. See, if I live in America, maybe when I reach 60 years old, I will migrate to Cuba. Because what? Because I spend less, but I can live longer. And if you go down, you can see Japan, 84 years old average, they only spend 4,800. You go to South Korea, 84 years old, 3,800. You go to Singapore, one of the most efficient in the world, 84 years old, 2,800. Then you can see that the country that is very efficient in managing their finances for health is because they have a very clear focus on promotive preventive. They are very focused in maintaining people healthy. The strategy of the government is to maintaining our people healthy, not to cure our people when they are sick. So we are very clear. So for you, what I would like to share with all ambassadors here, if you come back to your country, oh, Indonesia is very focused on health because we want to be entering the high-income country. But health sector in Indonesia is also a very interesting market. Why? Because now our average per capita is only 140. Malaysia, our closest, is 430, around 300 US difference, and the average life is 76. I will be 60 next year. You know, that's why I'm not the right guy to walk across this stage. But you know, Indonesia population are aging. If we come like Malaysia in the next 5 years, 72 to 76, logically, if our healthcare system as efficient as Malaysia, which is we are not, then our average spending will increase by 300 US dollar per capita from 140 to 430. 300 US, you multiply by 280 million populations. If my calculators are right, it's around 84 billion US dollar. If in the next 15 years we go to Singapore, 84 years old, the most efficient in the world, 2,800, so 2,700 difference with Indonesia per capita spending now. You multiply by 280 million, that will be 756 billion opportunities. So ladies and gentlemen, when you come back to talk to your industrialists, your entrepreneurs, your bankers, make sure that they told if you want to buy low, you go to Indonesia because the upside is very, very big, and start investing in health in Indonesia. And I would like to close like this. You know, I'm a banker for 30 years. I make my clients very, very wealthy. And they make a good decision how to increase their wealth. I become the health minister almost 2 years. I help the Indonesian people not to be healthy, not to be wealthy, but to be healthy. And I've seen my clients that is very savvy in investing, increasing their wealth. They're not so much good in investing in their health. And we are talking to this guy. When these guys are young, like the second row or third row, they always talk about money, investment. You see the WhatsApp group, I want to invest here, this is opportunity there, invest in startup here, this is the multiples. But when we talk to people with the age of the first row, then you see a different conversation in WhatsApp group. Who are the doctors that you're using? What are the medicine that do I need stem cells so I can live longer? Then I realized the priority of any human being on earth. Because I talked to this guy, you're a very rich guy. Do you want to have the most beautiful house in the world? Or a simple, but if you have a most beautiful house in the world, but you can only stay one week in a month, because 3 weeks you have to go to the hospital. Or you have a smaller house, but you stay 1 month always in your house. They prefer stay in this decent house. The same thing, you have the Rolls Royce. But you have to, because you are sick, then you have to use a wheelchair to enter your Rolls Royce. Or you have only a Toyota Kijang, but you don't use wheelchair. Everybody will choose a Kijang without a wheelchair. Although for myself, I will use Rolls Royce, but I don't use a wheelchair. But what I share to you is, health is a highest priority for every human being done well. So the best health, the best wealth is health. So people like you, for ex-CEO of the largest bank in Indonesia, they're 30 years spending my time to work about money, about wealth, and then I move to health. This is my advice. Try to consider to change your profession from ambassador to health professionals, from economist to health professional, or like me, the banker to health professionals, because then you feel good. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have just listened to the analysis of development trend here in Asia Pacific region, and we also got a very good insight of what that might mean for Indonesia. So, His Excellency Pak Budi Sadikin, Minister of Health of Indonesia, and also Mr. Christophe Bahuet, UNDP's Deputy Regional Director for Asia and Pacific, thank you very much for your excellent speech. Ladies and gentlemen, could you join me and once more give them a loud applause? Thank you. Thank you very much. And at this point, I would like to welcome you once again. Thank you very much for joining our presentation of UNDP's Regional Human Development Report for the Asia and Pacific region. My name is Norimasa Shimomura. People call me Nori, so please. I'm the resident representative of UNDP here in Indonesia. I will be moderating for the rest of the session. So listening to the presentation, I felt like the general pattern that Pak Christophe described for the Asia and Pacific also applies to Indonesia. Take a look at the progress. Indonesia has seen a commendable progress over the past decades. Look at the poverty rate. Indonesia's poverty rate used to be above 40% in year 2000, and this has come down to 2.5%. Look at the Human Development Index that UNDP uses around the countries and around the world. Indonesia's Human Development Index was below 0.6 in year 2000, and it is currently above 0.7, making Indonesia one of the high human development countries. So there has been a lot of progress. And on top of this, Indonesia keeps running fast with the economic growth rate of 5% approximately each year. So this is a great story. Having said that, inequality holds back Indonesia. Back in year 2000, about 30% of Indonesia's total wealth was held in the hands of richest 10% in this country. What has happened to this figure? Today, 38% of the total wealth of Indonesia is held in the hands of the richest 10%. So this is a backward shift. And also, Indonesia's own assessment has it that the regional disparities is very broad there's a wide regional disparity in the HDI in this country. So it's assessed the highest HDI in this country is enjoyed by Jakarta district, above 0.8, and the lowest in Papua at close to 0.6. So the disparities in inequality is in the rise. How about the disparities? Indonesia, unfortunately, has not been saved from the impact of rounds of disruptions that the world has experienced. For example, COVID-19 has started out as a major health crisis in this country, which has quickly turned into an economic and social challenge for this country, pushing down about 2.7 million people under the national poverty line. So this is quite a challenge the country experienced. And not only this, the whole country was pushed back down from the upper middle income country status back to middle income country status. So that was the impact of the COVID. And of course, Indonesia was not safe from the impact of the cost of living crisis that many countries have experienced after the eruption of the conflict in Ukraine. This country's inflation rate was pushed up to almost 6%, and it has taken more than 12 months for this country to bring back this inflation rate to the pre-COVID level. Similarly, climate change. I think in Indonesia, unfortunately, we feel the impact of climate change in a very tangible way. It is said that about 40% of Indonesia's population are directly affected by disasters. And each year, disasters actually cost Indonesia about $17 billion. $17 billion each year. So this is a tremendous impact, and this does not even include the need for long-term investment in adjusting the agriculture or human settlement or human health. So those are a large impact that Indonesia is suffering. So if you remember the presentation, Indonesia too enjoys the rapid progress over the past decades, but it is hampered also by the inequality and rounds of crises and disruption. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to know what you think, and I'd like to invite you to take out your mobile phone. I'm sure you have one. I hope you have one. Please take out your mobile phone, and please go to menti.com. You see on the screen, menti.com. It's spelled MENTI.com. Or you can use the QR code, scan it from your camera and tap it, and it will take you to the website. And please, once you are in the menti.com, enter the 8-digit number that you see on the screen. This is 78919343. Looks like a phone number, but please don't call this number. 78919343. So are you there? You are there? Okay, I'll give you a little bit more time. Once you are in the menti.com, you will see a question, but let's keep the QR code for a few more seconds. Yes, it's really easy. In case you have never tried, please try. This is your debut day. Are you in? Oops, okay. Someone's struggling. Who needs more time? Okay. All right, maybe we can move on. So once you're in menti.com, well, the spelling of the menti.com you can still see at the top, and the code you can also still see at the top. You see this question: what do you think the major disruptions to human development in Indonesia are? So I'd like to know what your answers might be. This is a multiple choice question, so you can select three answers if you like. You don't have to choose 3. I think the answers are coming in. Oh, this is good. A lot of people seems to think jobs, democratic erosion, climate change are major causes of future disruptions. This is interesting. And you can see that one could be dependent on each other and they are not mutually exclusive. Interesting. Yeah, looks like job is winning. Okay. It's very good. Who needs more time? I'm trying to see you. Yeah. Just in case you're trying to log on still, please go to menti.com. You can see at the top the website and enter the 8-digit code and you will get this question. Okay, so we have 88 answers so far. And it has stopped. So thank you very much. Since you have your mobile phone, keep it with you. Don't log out. Some people are still doing it. So let's wait for a few more seconds. Please keep your phone because I have one more question to ask on the menti.com. And the question is, do you feel optimistic about your future or your children's future? This is a simple yes or no question. I see 80 people trying to respond, but I don't see the number yet. Oh, I do see the number. Okay. Oh, this is good. You're optimistic bunch. Very good. 59% yes, 42% no, and we have 99. Is there one more person who can add to this? Maybe not. Okay, this is really good. Thank you. Ooh, 100. All right. So we got 59 yes, 58 yes. One person changed. Oh no, it became 101. Okay, so this is good. Thank you very much. So it seems that people are indeed anticipating some more disruptions to come in the future. And many of you, at least 40% of you, are feeling a little worried about the prospect of our future, your future. So the question is, in this circumstance, what can we do? The Regional Human Development Report suggests adopting three new pathways, and the first is to place people at the center of development. So we need to pursue development not for money, not for industry, but for people. So we need to place people genuinely at the heart of what we do. That's the suggestion. Second suggestion is that we need a new model of economic growth. So we cannot keep on doing the same way as the past, but we need some calibration to our economy. And thirdly, we need to generate a momentum for real change, not a pledge for change, but a real action-oriented change that is genuine and is going to happen. Now, the big question then is, how are we going to do this? Any idea? Well, I don't have to answer this question, fortunately, because today I have excellent, prominent panel speakers who is going to think and answer these questions for me. So at this point, I'd like to invite our panel speakers. May I invite the three panel speakers to come onto the stage? I do not know if the third speaker has arrived, because I heard that she's stuck in the traffic. Ibu Shinta. And Dr. Vivi. Hello. Hello. Great, please take any seat that you like. Great. Thank you very much. So I heard that our third panel speaker is unfortunately stuck in the traffic, who has just arrived. Super. So I hope you're wearing the microphone already. Okay, great. Please take a seat. So I have wonderful speakers on the stage with me. And I'd like to first ask the question to Dr. Vivi. Dr. Vivi Alatas. She is the senior economist of this country. She used to be the lead economist of the World Bank in Indonesia, and she has a deep insight on poverty and poverty reduction. So Dr. Vivi, thank you very much for joining us today. Well, you can answer the question there, or you can join me in the center stage, wherever you wish. So you have heard the presentation, and you may have even read the report. The Regional Human Development Report is still advocating, saying that economic growth is quite important for our future. However, the growth strategy that we have today doesn't work, and it has to be changed. So my question to you, and Dr. Vivi, is what does this actually mean, and how can Indonesia do this? And if I may ask yourself to keep the answers to 5 minutes so that I can ask more questions to you later, that'll be appreciated. Over to you.
Thank you, Nori, for a very important questions. I will not talk about the specific growth theory or growth approach that needs to be addressed, but I will talk more about the importance of social protections in Indonesia, because we learn from COVID. Indeed, COVID is a wake-up call for Indonesia and any other countries about the importance of having strong social protection. And this importance of social protections will translate into ability for Indonesia to grow more, to ensure that what Pak Budi already mentioned, having the best, healthy, and also ability to come up addressing the middle income trap. Indeed, one thing that has become clear, that our social protection system have some cracks in it. Of course, there has been significant improvement, especially if we compare to the last decades, but there are still quite a lot of gaps and challenges that needs to be addressed. For example, limited coverage. Too many people are not having the social protection that they should have. So it means that we are not fighting poverty and inequality as effectively as we could. The second issue is fragmentations and in our social protection systems. Our social protection system lack coordinations and coherence approach among various institutions and also among various programs. It's like a bunch, or having a bunch of different players playing at the same field, but are not talking with each other, are not working with each other. So what we need is a better integrated and also coordinated approach. We need different types of social institutional arrangement for social protection. But the other issues are already mentioned earlier in the report is inadequate financings. Yes, indeed, there has been improvement if we compare to the previous before crisis, but simply Indonesia not directing enough money for social protections. We are trailing behind other countries. For example, Indonesia spent around 2.3% of GDP on social protections. Other countries like Malaysia spend around 5%. Mexico spend around 7.4%. On average, OECD spend around 21%. But another big challenge is targeting, because the effectiveness of social protections depend on the effectiveness of targeting. But targeting in Indonesia is a complex issue. Being an archipelago with more than 18,000 islands, but also the most importantly is the fluidity of poverty in Indonesia. Poverty is very fluid in Indonesia, with people exit and enter poverty. 50% of the poor were not poor in the previous years. If we want to improve the targeting system, we need to take account these dynamic natures of poverty so that we can address the twin challenge of addressing poverty, exclusion error and inclusion error. So, but again, as you mentioned earlier, and also the report also mentioned, we cannot overlook climate. Why? Because we've seen the devastating impact of earthquakes, floods, and climate change, and our countries are prone with disasters. It means we need to ensure having a social protection that stands strong, so that whatever happens in the future, Indonesia can actually reach its vulnerable population with this key action that needs to be done. Thank you, Nori.
Thank you very much. That was short and sweet. That was great. Listening to you and also remembering what our colleagues spoke earlier, I was thinking that Indonesia probably needs a new model of economic growth that has a built-in system that makes the society and economy resilient to future shocks. And when I say this, I'm just remembering Budi, the Menteri Budi, who left, I think. But yeah, he often says, and he said it again too, essentially, that we need to prevent future disease against future shock. And that's one of the most effective way of tackling disruptions. That's very true. And often he says, how do we do this? Is to, and he said it today too, to strengthen the disease surveillance system. And also in that context, he's trying to build the network of laboratories, the genome sequencing, whole genome sequencing laboratory network in this country. And I feel very fortunate that UNDP, under COVID, for instance, we've been working very closely with the government of Indonesia to develop a digital application. It's called Smile, that was used by the government to deliver over 450 million doses of COVID vaccines across the whole of Indonesia. And building on this assistance cooperation we have with the ministry, we are now supporting the Ministry of Health to exactly establish the network of whole genome sequencing laboratories. And also, listening to you, Dr. Vivi, I was thinking that we really need a new model of sustainable development. And this is a little difficult for me to explain, but I think we need to change the way the market considers what is economically valuable and what is not economically valuable. And when I say this, carbon pricing, climate change and carbon pricing comes to my mind because this is a new market that we are creating. And UNDP here works with more than 7 ministries that are involved in the creation of carbon pricing. And helping them to actually realize the presidential regulation, the vision contained in it to operationalize the carbon pricing market in this country. And this involves the emissions cap introduction, emissions taxation introduction, as well as emissions trade and offsetting. And I'm talking about both green carbon and blue carbon. So this is one way I think we are working with the country to change the economic values in the market. And when we talk about changing the value sets of the services and products, I think we can also talk about business and human rights. So we work with the government to help them introduce a national strategy on business and human rights. What is this? Essentially, we are helping the government and companies in this country to build their capacities so that they can promote human rights within the business practices. So you would agree probably, I think these days more investors and consumers yourselves prefer to purchase or invest in companies with better human rights records, right? And companies that are more transparent and companies that takes care of the environment. So this is the kind of thing that came to my mind. It was very thought-provoking, Dr. Vivi. Thank you very much. Maybe you can return to your seat and I will ask you more questions a little later. And next, I'd like to invite Mbak Putri Komardin. Mbak Putri Komardin. Komardin is the member of Indonesian Parliament. Thank you very much,
Thank you, Nori,
for joining us today. This
you.
is great to have you. Mbak Putri, you have been a strong advocate of young people and women, and I've been looking at you and listening to you over the past years with a lot of admiration. Thank you once again for joining. Now, could you tell us what kind of policies are in place here in Indonesia to make sure that no one is left behind, particularly in view of the crises and rounds of disruptions that we heard about? Well, you were not here, unfortunately, but there are rounds of disruptions like COVID, cost of living crises, and climate change, for instance. And many people here, when we asked them the question using the menti.com, many people said there's going to be more disruptions to come. So be careful. So what kind of policies are in place so that no one is actually left behind from the development process when, in fact, we anticipate these kinds of crises? And also, taking advantage of your background, we often hear that young people are the future leader, right? And I fully agree with that statement. But maybe it helps for our colleagues if you could elaborate what that means and how we can help the young people to more meaningfully participate and also contribute to helping the society to address resilience, the issues of resilience and sustainability, sustainable development a little bit different in the future. If you could also keep your answer to 5 minutes, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Nori, for such a lengthy and heavy question. I hope I can answer that. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, UNDP, for the invitation. Maybe to kickstart my answer, as a young MP myself, of course, we have committed ourselves, our lives, to building the next generation of Indonesia. And as part of our parliamentary roles, we have unwavering commitment by marking allocated budget of 20% of the national budget to the education sector. And this is all for the next generation of Indonesia, and it has reached a substantial amount of 612.2 trillion in 2023. And this allocation has experienced a consistent annual increase, with the forthcoming year set to rise to 660 trillion. And this budget will strategically focus on elevating the competence of teachers and educational staff, because after COVID, we realized that our teachers are not equipped with the adequate amount of IT and also technology knowledge. And we also hope to reduce educational disparities by ensuring an equitable distribution of teachers and educational facilities, because as we know, Indonesia has 17,000 islands, and our development is still concentrated in Java, where we are currently seated on, and we hope to, make the disparities go away through this budget. And we also promote the quality of early childhood education, because we know we have a lot of problems with linguistic abilities and also numeristic abilities, and this is reflected on our PISA scores that has been low for the past years. So we're trying to improve in that sector. And we also try to widen access to education across all levels. And this budget is also allocated to enhance the quality of supporting educational infrastructure, particularly in remote and also underserved areas, and strengthening the nexus between vocational education and the job market. We also try to expand our scholarship programs. I am currently seated in House Commission 11, where we partner with the Ministry of Finance, and we have this endowment fund for scholarships. And through the years, it has we have increased the allocation of budget, and now we have reached 190 trillion for the scholarship program. And we also try to foster cultural promotion and also nurture research and innovation, because this has been our point of weakness in the sense that our research and innovation sector is not at par with our neighboring countries. And as for the health sector, I think Pak Budi has discussed at great length about that, so I'm gonna skip the health sector. And we also have allocated budgets for social protection. And by this, we aim to create positive income effects that can empower the low-income groups and allowing them to improve their consumption and also overall well-being. And to achieve this objective, we have allocated 476 trillion that has been earmarked for diverse programs, including food assistance, pre-employment training support, energy subsidies, insurance premium coverage, and also scholarships. And these initiatives have been designed to expedite poverty reduction, elevate overall well-being, and also contribute to sustained human development, and aiming to break the cycle of poverty. And we also must highlight that our emphasis extends beyond merely increasing the budget allocations, and the key lies in prioritizing spending quality and ensuring it translates into tangible outputs and outcomes that significantly improve human resources quality. And enormous budgetary allocations lose their significance if the programs fail to reach the people. And in line with this perspective, the health law has removed mandatory spending provisions in the health sectors, emphasizing the principle of money follows the program. After COVID, we realized that when we have the allocated budget for health, it's not effective because, as a matter of fact, we need more than what is allocated. And to fortify the spending quality, we have instituted regulations under Law Number 1 of 2022 concerning financial relations between the central government and regional governments. And the primary objective is to steer government spending toward providing high quality and equitable public services. And several critical provisions within this law include focusing regional spending on essential public services to attain minimum service standards, enforcing discipline and allocating mandatory spending as regulations stipulate, particularly in education, and imposing a cap on personnel spending, limiting it to 30% of the regional budget, or APBD, as we know, and ensuring a minimum allocation of 40% of the regional budget to infrastructure for public services. And in our legislative capacity within House Commission 11, which deals with financial and also the financial industry, we also actively try to ensure that our legal framework is conducive to the advancement of education. And an example of this is our commitment, where we reject the attempt of the government to tax the education sector. And all 9 political parties agreed to reject because we know that by imposing taxes to education sector, it will add the burden to the people. And also we have enacted the Financial Sector Development and Strengthening Act, or known as Undang-Undang Pengembangan dan Penguatan Sektor Keuangan. And in this law, we have actively promoted financial inclusion and also enhanced financial literacy among young people and women. And this proactive stance directly responds to the ever-evolving landscape of financial products, many of which target the youth demographic. You may have heard a lot about the suicide stories, which arises from youth fall prey to financial, what do you call it, pinjol, or this is the online financial schemes, and they were unable to pay the loans, and that's why they become depressed, and then in turn they committed suicide. And it is very important to equip our young citizens with a robust understanding of financial matters, to shield them from illicit investments or illegal loans activities. And we also have introduced stringent penalties encompassing fines and imprisonment to deter individuals engaged in illegal online lending activities. And these measures are critical in our efforts to combat all these unlawful entities that have brought harms to the young people, particularly among the student population. So as a young person myself, I hope that more youth will be joining me in the parliament for the next election, because at the moment we only have 16% of people under 40 in the parliament, and 60% out of 575 people in the parliament at the moment is not enough to represent the whole youth, which will represent 54% of the voters in the next year. So I hope that by being the voice of the young person and also a woman, I'm a double minority, I'm a youth, also a woman, I hope that this can be an example of a lot of people that we can be heard if we take the chance. So maybe that is
Great,
from me.
thank you very much, Mbak Putri. So here's a chance for young participants to run for the elections, perhaps. But joke aside, I think it's really good to hear that concrete actions are taken by the Parliament in regards to promoting inclusive approach to development. Because in my view, inclusive approach to development has multiple benefits. Of course, it promotes equity, right? And when it promotes equity, it will prevent the sense of grievance from coming up. And when you prevent the sense of grievance from coming up, it in turn promotes social cohesion. And I think this we heard in Pak Christophe's presentation earlier. And when the social cohesion is there, we're hoping that social stability is there. And the stability is a key to the peace. So this is quite important. And as UNDP, when I was listening, I just remembered our work with the Ministry of Village, because this country, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the government spends almost $5 billion US each year to support village development. and UNDP is now supporting the government to help integrate a methodology that helps participatory methodology and inclusive methodology for local development planning. So when they actually develop a local level development plan, the voice of the people are actually heard in concrete ways to promote equity, to prevent grievances from arising. So we're trying to test this in 100 villages and soon 1,500 villages. And our aim is to scale this up to all 75,000 villages across this large archipelago. So really, so we're also trying to promote this inclusive approach in our own way, but I think we can partner much more with the parliament, especially young and motivated parliamentarian like yourself. So thank you very much, Mbak Putri.
And thank you for the support from UNDP. The UNDP has been working with us, the Youth Caucus, in the parliament for the past years to educate the young people about politics and parliaments, because there's still a lot of negative stigma around young people being in politics. So thank you for the support from UNDP.
Thank you. Thank you. So now, let me move on to our third panel speaker, and that is Ibu Shinta Kamdani. She is a prominent business professional in this country and vice chairwoman of Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which is Kadin. Thank you very much for joining us today. Ibu Shinta, well, shall we go to the center of the stage? But I was thinking, because I've been standing for the past hour and a half, I'm getting a little tired. So if you don't mind, you see, by chance there is our sofa coming our way. So maybe they will place the sofa somewhere here and we can, a little surreal, but we can take a seat. Which one would you like to take? This one?
Anything.
Okay, how about that one? Yeah. All right.
You know, this is really, I have to applaud UNDP. You are such a creative bunch. I mean, look at this. I've never been. So, wow.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I feel like I'm in examination.
You see my shiny outfit today? So, well, Ibu Shinta, thank you very much for joining us today. So we have learned a lot already, and we have listened to many speakers today. And I was just wondering, listening to other speakers speak, what are the major concerns and impact of these rounds of crises and disruptions that we talked about on the private sector in Indonesia? And what would be the coping strategy of the private sector? Also, if you could elaborate maybe whether and what kind of role private sector can play in mitigating the impact of those crises on the society as a whole. So what's the impact on the private sector? What's the coping mechanism for that? And also, how can private sector help the society to mitigate the impact?
Yes, thank you very much, and really a pleasure to be here. I just came back actually from the US, and very, very important trip of the president. But what's interesting is I just came back from also the APEC meeting in San Francisco. And you know, what really becomes the highlight of that meeting was the meeting between the two biggest economy, obviously China, President Xi and President Biden. And President Biden addressing the CEOs was really clearly, mentioning that this is not about decoupling; it's about de-risking. So I think a lot of the statement that he made to us as CEOs has really give a more positive outlook on how we feel. Everybody was coming in the situation, oh, what's going to happen to this world? So much uncertainties. But that speech that he gave to us, and after he met President Xi, give us a lot of confidence that these two large economy will make this, will actually come to some sort of understanding. And I think that's an important step on making us as businesses from the private sectors that we want to be that kind of statement that we want to hear. But going back of some of the challenges of the private sectors, I think, first of all, we have to see the microeconomic conditions. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we know how much at the moment when we talk about economic growth, how is this going impacted, right? Because the global growth right now actually 2023 3%, but 2024 is even lower, it's 2.9%. Indonesia is almost like staying at 5%, so we're still looking good, but the 5% also with a lot of uncertainty. But again, the stagnant economic growth has impact. Also, the high inflation. If you look at the high inflation, we see the global inflation is 6.6%, Indonesian inflation of 2.3%. Obviously, this impacted in many of the doing business on how impacted our in operating our business, and also the prolonged geopolitical tension. I think with what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, what's happening now again with Palestine and Israel, obviously that has some impact to the business. And we have to also remember the climate issues. The climate change, I think it was mentioned before by previous speakers, that definitely also impacts us. But how is this? If we look at what this directly impacts, is the higher production costs. Clearly, this put us a lot more burden to business because of higher production costs. We are looking into hijack of interest rate, that impact on higher also costs. But we also look at the decreasing of purchasing power. Definitely, this is something that the government needs to pay attention to. And decreasing foreign demand for export. You know, a lot of our labor-intensive industry, textile, furniture, this is all export market. And now, the drop is almost 40%, 50%. So it's a significant drop. What I said to our members, I said, you know, at the end of the day, they will still be importing. Those nations will still import. But we will have to be much more competitive, right? Because the cake now is much small. They have to be divided to less people, to less countries. So basically, if we look at the reduce of demand export, this is where now you've seen in the media is also triggering what's happening when we talk about the reducing employment, you know, we have PHK. I mean, this is really true that because of the demand export, of course, now it also impact labor, right? And I think what is also important is that who can deliver cheaper goods, right? We talk about labor intensive, we talk about Bangladesh now, also Ethiopia now, for the textile industry, they're huge, right? So can we compete? This is something that we need to pay attention. And clearly the high uncertainty on all these things will still makes business very difficult to make projections. So while we are now at the end of the year trying to look at what the numbers would look like next year, this is all a big questions for us on what's going to happen. So the high uncertainty is definitely there. But I have to say we do have coping mechanism. And some of the coping mechanism that we see is, first of all, Indonesia is very clear that we have an issue of the digital transformation, right? That's one of the coping mechanism that we feel business is also ready. So the digital transformation, if we look at now, we see that that the digital transformation has also created a much more adoption of new technologies. So this is not just about this is also about not just about the technology 4.0, 5.0, but also the new technology that also help manufacture. So this is something that I think are an important mechanism and enabler. The second thing is we also look at that the positive growth of MSME sector, which has contributed to 61% of the overall GDP and absorbed 97% of total workforce. So we can't forget that the MSME play a very, very big role in Indonesian economy. So this is something that we have to pay attention. Also, the positive domestic consumption rate, we really feel that this is growing 4.5% year on year, which makes more than half of the economy. Also, there are now, of course, commitment from businesses on sustainable practices. Businesses wants to reach the net zero, so this has also helped in trying to cope some of the challenges. And the key, I think the last, and this is also from your report, is the human resources and productive age population. We've seen that Indonesia has a bonus demography. We've seen that Indonesia will enjoy 68% of the population in the productive age. But I always say that this bonus demography can be a liability if we don't create enough jobs. Because right now, the biggest problem of Indonesia is we don't absorb enough people. So what happened is Indonesia is moving from a labor-intensive to a capital-intensive industry. So in the past 7 years, we see there's a reduction almost 1/4 for every investment occur. So this way is if we don't create those jobs, we will be in trouble because this bonus demography will not be helping us. This can be a liability. And part of the way that we see, because industry cannot absorb enough, we will have to go into the MSME. Because then that means we have to also create new jobs. With the MSME, we also have to ensure that the MSME also develop. We call it how to scale up the MSME. Night class, we call it. They cannot stay in the same way. So all these are interactive. Now, if we look at what do you think the private sector, how the private sector should play in the Indonesia journey throughout this whole poly crisis? I would say that I think we actually in Kadin, we have our roadmap that we have submitted to the government. We call the roadmap of Indonesia, Gold Indonesia, Indonesia Emas 2045. What is it? There are 4 areas that we believe is very important for private sector for engine of the economic growth. The first is the increasing of the resilience. I think it is important that private sector can support to improve resiliency, and this we have seen through improving health. We have seen the pharmacy industry. We talk about the food security. And the second is promoting prosperity. On the prosperity side, we focus on development of the global lighthouses in strategic manufacturing sector. So this is also improving the financial and digital services and also developing ecotourism and accelerating the MSME growth. So that's the second pillar. When we talk about the value-added industries and so forth, this is where we believe we have to unlock the global lighthouses. And the third is strengthening inclusivity. I think this is very, very important because in strengthening inclusivity, we're not talking about just the transforming health system and empowering also vulnerable communities. We talk about gender, we talk about leaving nobody behind. So the inclusivity actor on how to do the skill development and so forth is very important. And lastly, we're talking about promoting sustainability through decarbonization effort to achieve the net zero. So these are four important things. But in order to have this, we will need high quality human resources as one of the key factors to achieve positive human development index. And what are these? First is improving access and quality of education and health services. The second is improving linkage between supply and demand workforce. And this is important because what we're saying is the link and match. What comes out from the education system has to be absorbed by industry. This is something that are still not working very well in Indonesia that we need to improve, the linkage, the link and match. And also improving access on skill and digitalization. This is very important that in the era now, digitalization technology plays a big role. We talk about future of jobs and things like that, and this is what Indonesia needs to improve. And we talk about also upscaling and rescaling, because many of the jobs right now are low-skilled jobs. So how we can upscale and rescale program, and also have incentives. Now a government provides incentive. We have a special deductible tax and so forth. This to help boost the upscaling and reskilling program. So I just want to end my answer by also some of the program that at the moment Kadin is doing. And some of the program that we're currently doing is, first we have the focus support of the vocational training. We have also the internship and activities that we work together with the industries. We also have the digital talent training through Kadin Capacity Development Program. So we are focusing very much on also the skill exchange and so forth with other countries through many of the CEPA agreements. So Kadin is very much putting human capital development in the forefront, and that's, for us, is one of the most important thing in facing many of the challenges we have. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so very much. So I realize the private sector in Indonesia obviously has a huge role, or rather a huge stake in anticipating future shock and to be prepared for it. But as you elaborated, it has also a huge role, first and foremost, by absorbing the labor supply and generating the continued growth to mitigate the shocks of those disruptions for the society. So you mentioned climate change, and I couldn't help thinking that climate change these days creating momentum for energy transition. And I've looked at the latest energy roadmap of Indonesia, which has this aspiration of increasing the proportion of renewable energy in this country from the current 14%, 14%, to 44% by year 2030.
Yeah.
And I think by year 2045, that is 75%. I mean, believe me, a year ago, I think these figures didn't actually, match.
You won't believe it, right?
Yes, we have many versions of this, but now finally we have a coherent vision. This is great. I think this creates a huge business opportunity, obviously. But
actually, on energy transition, I just want to mention, we have, as you know, out of the G20 last year, we have the JETP program,
Right.
the Just Energy Transition Partnership. And UNDP, I think, is involved as well in that program. And I'm very happy, I just finished the meeting today. I'm very happy that we are tomorrow actually launching it, right? So I hope finally there's some spark of the 20 billion that will be coming
Yes.
into Indonesia for the energy transition.
Indeed. In fact, I was going to say that energy transition, I mean, will push many businesses beyond their comfort zone. I mean, that's the challenging part of the energy transition, isn't it? And also, unfortunately, it may have negative impact on some communities, also some workers, because they have to upskill themselves or work in another sector.
That's why we always say it's a just transition.
Thank you.
It's a just transition. And definitely we talk about green jobs. So I'm happy to share with you that actually I'm also chairing APINDO, the Indonesian Employers Association. And we are now working with the labor unions in creating, for example, the renewable energy jobs, the training for those kind of jobs. So we're already moving towards these green jobs.
Yes.
So I said to our labor unions, I said, enough is not, we've been talking every year, we always fight about minimum wage and things like that. We have to move. This is a new paradigm. We have to move into looking for the future. And I think the green jobs that we're talking about, we have to make them ready.
Yes.
They have to have that, we talk about reskilling. This is it.
Yep. So this is quite important, and indeed UNDP was leading the Just Transition Group under the JETP. JETP, ladies and gentlemen, stands for Just Energy Transition Partnership for Indonesia, and this is supported by G7 and a few like-minded donor countries. The initial investment figure they talk about was $20 billion. But tomorrow, as you say, the government is launching the first investment plan for JETP initiative for Indonesia, which carries, estimates the priority investment needs of $67 billion. And I just wanted to say that a big money is involved in this for climate and also SDGs, but the financing is really, it's not just coming from the private sector, it also comes from the public sector, and I should say the money should come from domestic as well as foreign sources. And so this we call often climate financing, SDG financing. And I was going to say that Indonesia is fortunate because this country has been spearheading climate financing in the world. And the best example to tell is back in 2018, this government issued the world's first sovereign green Islamic bond. And then after that, they issued SDG bond. And only this year, they even issued sovereign blue bonds.
Yeah.
And altogether so far, they have raised more than $8 billion. And I must say, UNDP is hugely proud of ourselves to have been able to support this effort of the government, together with some other UN agencies. So, yes, I think this means we have a lot more to work together with Kadin Ibu Shinta. So thank you very much once again. Thank you very much. So perhaps you can go back to your original seat. I'm looking at my clock, and I just wanted to, at this point, I actually wanted to invite many questions. Oh, there's music. Okay. So, what should I do? Okay, maybe I will choose just one person to ask a question from the floor to one of the panels. So don't kill me because there's so many people in this room, but who wants to ask the question? Okay, please. The microphone is coming to you, and if you could introduce yourself and raise a brief question.
I'll keep it very brief. So, Amanda McLaughlin, I am the Development Director for the UK in Indonesia, also covering the ASEAN region. And thank you so much for this wonderful event and how creative you've been, but also for the important discussions as well. It's been a real pleasure to listen. It's very timely for us because today in London, our Prime Minister is launching a new white paper on international development, which will take us out to 2030. And that white paper will be a call to action for an accelerated progress on the SDGs. And it will say that the global context for development has changed, and the UK approach to development needs to change with it, and say that a radical new way of working is required for the UK. Given that we recognise that, I'd like to ask Dr. Vivi whether or not you have any advice for so-called traditional donors, G7 donors like the UK, who recognise the need to work differently in this region. How should we go about doing that?
I think there are a lot of development partners here. One of the roles of development partners is, I sense like the biggest roles that development partners can help is pushing Indonesia for evidence-based policy making. Not only on SDG, not only on just transition, because challenge is enormous, and without evidence, we might have the wrong kind of policies and programs. How? Advocate and also sharing what works and what doesn't in other countries. Advocate the importance of using data and also advocates the importance of performance-based budgeting. Currently, Indonesia have very small amounts of spending on research and for example, like collaborations between government and university is very, very small. But overall, the challenge of Indonesia are probably the same with the challenge that you face in other countries. Learning from each other are one of the most important things. Another thing is also pushing, giving, showing how in your program, for example, UNDP or other bilateral partners, pushing for evidence, because we cannot really rely only based on ideology and perception when we have the difficulty. For example, youth unemployment rate is very high in Indonesia. Idleness is very high. And at the same time, SDGs on the gender participation, Indonesia only have around labor force participations of 50% women, and this has been decades. We also have quite a lot of other issues on technology, on ensuring, like what I mentioned earlier, Indonesia spend more on social protection. There is a need of advocacy, but there is a need also of a collaboration between Indonesia and development partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the end of this session, and apologies, I cannot take more questions. However, could you take out your mobile phone again? Let's do this again. So can you go to menti.com? You can use the QR code on the screen once again. And again, please enter the same numerical code you see on the screen. That is 78919343. Well, you can see it. Please go to menti.com and enter the 8-digit number that you see on the screen. You got used to it, I think. It's easy to use the QR code. Are you there? Who needs time? Raise your hand, please. I can't see though. Okay, everyone's there? All right, so I have this time only one question to ask. Yeah, so you've heard everything you heard today, and it seems we are in the middle of this complex reality of many challenges to come. So what do you think in this reality that Indonesia should be prioritizing on? What should Indonesia focus on? Again, this is a multiple choice question, and you can choose up to 3 answers from the 6 choices that you have on the screen. The choices are strengthening the voice of the people, providing safe living environment, and then protecting the environment, and then considering long-term instead of short-term impact of policies, focus on long-term. And then the 5th one is innovating the current growth plan. And the last one is focus on reforming governance and fostering the spirit of change. This is good. If you haven't started, please go to menti.com on the website, menti.com, and then enter the code 78919343, and you should get this screen on your mobile phone. The question to answer is, amidst the complex reality we have, what should Indonesia focus on? So it looks like, interestingly, many people are saying reform governance and foster spirit of change, which is great, because by doing this, practically you can achieve anything. Smart. Okay, so we have 84 people answering, so maybe 85. Do you need more time? Okay, I think we are good. Thank you very much. I think we have come to the end of our event, and I'm supposed to summarize this event, right? But it's impossible to summarize, so I'll use this usual technique that I cannot summarize this rich discussion and the rich feedback and inputs we have received from you. Thank you very much for those input. But what I feel after being on this stage for an hour and a half is that we share the senses that we cannot continue doing what we used to do. No more business as usual way in the future. Because we face persistent challenge of inequality and unpredictable series of disruptions, we need to change our behaviors. And if you read the Regional Human Development Report, it does actually promote and advocate for these behavioral change. So first and foremost, it advocates for focusing on long-term vision. Don't think too short. Long-term vision that is focused on people in an inclusive approach. And secondly, it advocates for being prepared to adjust your strategy flexibly. Because there could be any disruptions happening and you cannot just keep on doing the same thing. You need to be very flexible in approach. And of course, the window of opportunity is very short these days, so we need to be much more quicker than even before. So in the report, it says that we need to be much more anticipatory, thank you very much, agile and adaptive in the future, so that we can keep building our capacity and expand the choices of our future generations. But honestly, listening to you and interacting with you over the past hour and a half, I feel that everyone does have some sense that there is going to be more of these disruptions, and we even know somehow what these disruptions might be. And perhaps we are already starting to think what should be the solutions. So honestly, I feel a little more optimistic than when I came up this stage and started this session. So thanks to your contributions. So thank you very much once again. Now, before I really close, I'd like to invite our panel speakers, give them 30 seconds each to give us your takeaways for all the participants who are here today. What should they remember and act on when they step out from this room? So if I may start the reverse order this time, that is, Ibu Shinta, could you start? 30 seconds elevator pitch. Oh, is there a microphone for Ibu Shinta?
Test.
Okay,
Is it
good.
working? Okay, I always find three things as the most important thing before we leave. First is how to be innovative. Second, how to be inclusive. And third, how to be collaborative. I think this is very, very important. At the end of the day, we know that people is at the center of whatever we do in the business. We always say now it's no longer about profit, but it's about people, it's about planet. How to have those balance. So I think my pitch will be how to be, for companies, I always say, our vision is to be sustainable excellence company, is to balance the profit, people, and planet.
Great, thank you very much. Mbak Putri, over to you.
Check. Yep. I always think that collaboration is the key to achieve the goal Indonesia 2045. So as a person of, I've only lived in this world for 30 years. Pak Nori, you're way above me in
Thank
knowledge.
you for the reminder.
And knowledge and network, I don't have what you have, but the young generation have a lot of things to say, and in the next 20 years, 30 years, we'll be dealing with the problems that are caused by the current generation. So we hope to be heard, male, female, it's all the same. So let us work hand in hand to ensure that Indonesia still exists the next 20 years, because it may not. be the case. So I beg you, everyone who are present in this very beautiful conference, we are hoping to, be the gold Indonesia, but also we have to maintain the environment as is today. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great, thank you very much. Finally, Dr. Vivi.
In all this struggle, addressing poverty, inequality, addressing development challenge, every one of us have some role based on our expertise, based on our experience, but every one of us also have the ability to advocate, to have 100%, 200% accountability. For example, if following Pak Menteri this morning, advocate for change from protection to promotions on health. Advocating the importance of just transition among private sector. Advocating the importance of evidence-based policymaking. But not only advocate, but also integrate in your role, whether it's as a development partner, as a researcher, as a parliamentary member, so that it can translate into actions. We cannot just talk only or reading papers without translating the finding of this research into actions. Thank you.
Great. Yes, we can. Thank you very much, everyone, for your interest and active participation. We'll be using your inputs very actively in the future, and hope we can see you again in the near future. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to offer our token of appreciation to all speakers. Mr. Christophe Bahuet, Deputy Regional Director UNDP, and also Mr. Norimasa Shimomura, Resident Representatives UNDP, please present the gifts to all speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a round of applause. Also, please find the QR code access for the 2024 Human Development Report for Asia and the Pacific on the screen. Ya, Bapak dan Ibu silakan memindai kode QR di layar untuk mengakses laporan pembangunan manusia 2024 untuk Asia dan Pasifik. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining our event. Please enjoy the refreshments available outside in the hallway. Bapak dan Ibu, terima kasih telah mengikuti acara kami. Silakan menikmati hidangan yang tersedia di lobi Tribrata. Terima kasih dan selamat sore.
Indonesia stands tall in the face of global challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic and climate crisis. As the chair of G20 in 2022, Indonesia showcased its role as a regional and global leader. Indonesia deepened its climate action commitment by raising the ambition of the nationally determined contribution. Yet, despite positive trends, some challenges remain. As part of the UN family, UNDP reaffirmed its support to Indonesia on sustainable, resilient, and inclusive development by focusing on the following key pillars. First, we ensure no one is left behind. Particularly, the most vulnerable individuals who may be excluded from development dividends. By supporting more accountable public services, by making healthcare more accessible. Second, we support Indonesia's economic transformation. With our partners, we focus on Indonesia's net zero ambition through just energy transition, reducing forest degradation, and developing the carbon trade mechanisms. We also forged a partnership with the Umbrella Association of Indonesian Businesses to promote corporate sustainability practices in the private sector, particularly for the micro, small, and medium enterprises ecosystems. UNDP's work is anchored on partnership, whether in facilitating development results in Indonesia or taking Indonesia's experiences to the world. Key to this success is UNDP's and our partners' continued innovation. By leveraging the massive potential of innovations in financing for SDGs and climate action, by putting local communities in the driver's seat, and by maximizing the benefits of digital technology. With 7 years left to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, UNDP remains committed to the government and the people of Indonesia to formulate solutions that can elevate Indonesia to new heights in human development for the benefit of every woman, man, and child, leaving no one behind.